All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Wasatch Front Regional Council Budget Committee for March 17th, 2025. I don't remember, do we do introductions? I feel like everybody knows each other on this.
Mostly it's just to read names in for the record.
Okay. So we've got on this call, we've got Andrew Gruber, Mayor Dandoy, Marion Florence, Andrea Pearson, Lee Perry, Wayne Benyon, Scott Wardle, Mike Newton, Jeff Silvestrini, Amy Winder Newton, Bob Stevenson, and Isaac Hyam. Did I get everybody?
And Councilmember Winder Newton, Isaac introduced himself as working in the council office for Salt Lake County.
Yes, he is our council office director and does a great job, and we're always happy to have him tuning in. So, all right, well, we'll go to our first agenda item. That is our consent agenda. So if we've got anyone who wants to make a motion for that, we'd love it.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Jeff Silvestrini.
Thanks, Mayor.
That motion.
All right, the second was from Commissioner Perry. Thank you. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, great. We'll now open up for public comment. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak?
I'm sorry, council member, I just wanted to ensure that the motion was for the financial statements as well.
Yes.
The agenda. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
So everything on our consent agenda. That's
and
correct.
welcome Mayor Ramsey.
Hi, good
and
morning.
I'll be dropping the links in the chat in just one moment.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Anything else that we need to discuss before we move on? Okay. Well, we had no public comments, so we'll move along to item number 3, the WFRC Budget Committee action. And Marion, do you want to kick this off, or Andrew, do one of you want to introduce this item?
I think Andrew's going to introduce, and then I'll get into the meat and the weeds.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Okay, thank you. And everybody, thanks so much, Madam Chair and colleagues, friends, leaders. Thank you for joining us this morning for an important WFRC Budget Committee meeting. The purpose of this meeting, it's a routine meeting. We do this every year, but it is an important one because this is the meeting where you review our draft goals for the next fiscal year, our draft budget for the next fiscal year, and then the detailed unified planning work program for the next fiscal year. That's the heart of this meeting. And then after that, on the agenda today, we also have some modest updates, proposed updates to some of our policies, our administrative and accounting policy and personnel policies, which we'll get to after the meat of the meeting. Now, I say it's rather routine and it's important, and this is a somewhat unusual time, I will acknowledge, with the federal budget. There's a lot of changes happening with regard to the federal budget and in Washington. And so what we propose to do, Madam Chair, is when we get to that portion of the talking about the budget on the federal funds, we can have some dialogue. We can give you some updates on our understanding of the state of play at this moment. Okay. Okay. So what I would propose to do is start out with the goals. So first talk about the goals, then we'll do budget, then we'll do the work program as needed. Just as a reminder, who is WFRC? Our mission and roles define who we are. And I won't go over this in any detail, but obviously you know what our mission is about building consensus. Our roles are to be a convener, a technical expert, a planner, and an implementer. And much of that falls under the banner of the Wasatch Choice vision, the broad vision that integrates transportation, land use, economic development together. Marion, just go back up for 1 second so everybody can take 5 more seconds to look at our mission statement there. Now, if the mission and roles are who we are, the goals for the next year are what we will do in the next year. So let's go to the goals. Now, I want to note to you the stability that we have in our goals, typically 1 year to the next, reflecting the ongoing role that we have, the ongoing work that we do in the organization. But I will say that this year, we, the staff team, took a really hard look at the goals. You know how sometimes when you do things year to year, you end up just adding, and they get longer and more detailed. Well, we took a really hard look and brought them from about 2 pages down to now 1 page, and 4 goals down to 3. And just so you can see, the first goal, now we have combined what we had in previous year's goals 1 and 2 into just 1 goal. And just so you can perhaps remember this, last year, goal number 1 was about the Wasatch Choice vision, and goal number 2 was about implementing our plans and our programs. And what we realized is that those 2 things are not distinct from one another. The way that we implement the Wasatch Choice vision in our region is through our plans and our programs and our assistance. So we integrated those 2 together into 1 goal that you see on the screen here: collaboratively advance the Wasatch Choice vision to accommodate growth and enhance quality of life. Marion, just so people aren't guessing, will you just show the 2 and 3, and then I'll come back to 1 in a moment. Goal number 2, provide subject matter expertise to federal, state, and local officials and policymakers. And then goal number 3, strive for organizational excellence. That's the sort of more internal goal. All right, now let's go back up to goal 1. And I will note, everybody, of course, we sent all of this material out to you in the packets ahead of time. Andrea dropped the link in the chat. But I'll just briefly run through these. Under goal number 1, you see that we've split this into sort of 3 categories: regional plans, funding and assistance, and resources. Now, the regional plans, when you think WFRC, this is probably what you think about, right? The Wasatch Choice vision and our regional transportation plan at our regional level, the multimodal transportation plan, which in of itself is the transportation component of the Wasatch Choice vision. And then Utah's Unified Transportation Plan, integrating transportation planning across the entirety of the state with all of our partners. And then the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, rather than looking out decades, that looks out at what are the actual projects to be funded over the next 4 to 6 years. Those are all transportation. And then, because we look broadly at the relationship between transportation and economic development, that's D, the economic development strategy. And then also land use, and that's E, and that's supporting local communities and implementing their land use plans. I just want to note that we don't have land use authority, right? So transportation, we have a responsibility there. We have a role in economic development. You, the local governments, are in charge of land use along with the private property owners. But we work with you to support you in your land use and integrate that with transportation and economic development. Then funding and assistance, of course, is the project funding that we actually provide to communities to do transportation projects through our programs. And then the technical assistance, TLC, our Transportation and Land Use Connection Program that all of your communities have benefited from. By the way, Thursday at our Regional Growth Committee meeting, our plan is to announce the Mayor Dandoy, obviously you know this as the chair of that committee, to announce this year's awardees for the TLC program, and also station area planning. That's an example of that kind of technical assistance. And then finally, resources. This is sort of more generally available resources, access to opportunities as the metric by which we think about the performance of the transportation system vis-a-vis where homes are located and jobs are located and how we grow and have the system function well so people can get to those important opportunities. That actually is the overall purpose of the transportation system. Participating in significant specific transportation projects and studies in our region, enhancing our forecasting and modeling in travel demand. Another thing at Regional Growth Committee, Mayor Dandoy, in the committee that you'll be leading on Thursday, is an update on our planned notable work to do the most major enhancement to our travel demand models that we've done in a decade, to shift to what's called an activity-based model. Marion will cover that a little bit more when we get to the budget, because there's some costs associated with doing that enhancement of our modeling work. And then, of course, all important, fostering community and stakeholder engagement. This is communicating and engaging with the public and with our stakeholders about the work that we do. There's no policy success without communication success as well. They go hand in hand. That's the first goal. Marion, before you go down, let me just say one thing first. Last thing is the first word in this goal number 1. It starts with collaboratively. And you all know this is woven into our DNA and our culture. It's all about collaborating with you all and with our partners and our stakeholders to advance quality of life in the region. So that's goal number 1. I will pause briefly to see if anybody jumps in.
I was actually going to bring that up, of how much I love the words collaborative, building consensus. You know, we need more of that in government, right? And that's something WFRC is known for, and we know that our members are appreciative of that. So thank you for reminding us.
Thanks. I might also note, some of you might think, well, these are general descriptions. Where's the detail? And our thought in streamlining and being succinct is the goals are the what that we will do. The how of it is you give us the direction, do this thing. Here's what we want you to accomplish. And then we work through the details of how to do that. As always, we are happy to get into much more detail with you about the how, provide more information to you if and when you want that, now or any other time. But our theory is that goals set what we're supposed to accomplish, and then we go to work on the how, and that gets talked about throughout the year.
I actually really like that this is high level. I like that it's succinct. It makes it easy to read, easy to keep people's attention. They understand what it is. Of course, there's minutia, there's details, there's process, all of that. But having this concise like this, I think it's great.
I'm happy to hear you say that. That is reassuring. Thank you, Madam Chair, WFRC Chair. Thank you. Okay, numbers 2 and 3. Number 2, provide subject matter expertise to federal, state, and local officials and policymakers. And you see A to A, federal. We'll get into this a little bit more, but the federal transportation legislation and policy and funding, critical. It's always important, but this upcoming year is going to be a crucial one as the federal surface transportation reauthorization legislation is considered. And we're working really hard on that already. Commissioner Stevenson is the co-chair of the NARC, National Association of Regional Councils Transportation Committee. We've been really involved with AMPO, our other policy association. I was in DC for a few days last week. A lot of energy on this, and I think you're all aware of that, but this is going to be a big year on federal legislation and policy. 2B is at the state and local level. This captures the work that we do at the state capitol, for example, and working with you all to advance the implementation of the Wasatch Choice Vision, Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. And then the third one, 2C, is about air quality. And I would just point out here, the way we look at this is a balance, engage in efforts to enhance air quality while enabling the economy to flourish. I think it is a false choice to say that we can only do one of those, and we are working to accomplish both of those. Not noted here, but I will point out, and Mayor Silvestrini is very well aware of this as a member of the Air Quality Board, the State Air Quality Board, ozone. The big issue for us is ozone. And I think we're making real progress on that in engagement with new EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin in his office to address that. Mayor?
Yeah, we got some actually pretty good news at the National League of Cities congressional meeting last week. Director Zeldin spoke to the general session and indicated that he was working with the folks in Maricopa County, Arizona, who have the same kinds of ozone problems that we do with respect to not being in complete control of precursor chemicals for ozone and facing issues with a lot of those precursors being in the ambient environment because they come from pine trees or imported from forest fires or other sources. So he has indicated that he's going to be more flexible with respect to the draconian penalties that come into play. And then actually even subsequent to that, we had a tour of the Capitol, a lovely tour of the Capitol in the evening by our congressional delegation. I spent my time with Senator Curtis, who's also been focused on this issue for us. And Andrew and I actually had a good conversation with him. He thinks that the same thing, that the new administration is going to be a little more lenient with respect to understanding some of the particular concerns and difficulties. It's not that we don't want great air quality, and it's not that we haven't done things, to improve our air quality. We've done a lot of work to reduce, nitrous oxide emissions in connection with our particulate matter state implementation plan. And we're kind of trying to get credit for that with the ozone because it's the same kind of a precursor problem. But anyway, there's good news on that. And that is maybe a long report, but frankly, the penalties that would apply are draconian and would really hurt a fast growing state like Utah if we were to be subject to losing transportation funding for construction and planning. So hopefully we'll be able to navigate that.
Mayor, thank you so much. And I'll note that we're working on this in really close collaboration with the governor's office, with UDOT, with DEQ, DAQ, and as Mayor Silvestrini said, Senator Curtis and his staff are taking the lead for the Utah delegation, but everybody's engaged on this one. So I'm feeling optimistic about that. The third of three goals is strive for organizational excellence. This again is more inwardly focused on our administration. And you note here that always maintaining communication and transparency with the members of WFRC and our stakeholders to ensure that we have accountability, using our resources prudently and efficiently and maintain budget stability. These are things that are easy to say, but it really takes a dedicated sort of good policies and practices and culture to ensure that we're being really careful with with the public resources. This is really, really important to us. And Marion and the team do an amazing job in this arena. And then, of course, making sure that we're utilizing best practices and complying fully with applicable laws and regulations. In this regard, I might note, we are in a period of significant change to policy, guidance, likely regulation. The regulations haven't caught up to the executive orders and the policy directives that are changing within USDOT. The regulations will come. Presumably, there will be law changes as well. The overall approach that we take to this, as embodied in 3C, is we operate in full compliance with all applicable laws and regulations, federal and state. Of course, before the rules were changed, we did our work in compliance with the laws in effect at that time. Now that things are changing, the policies, directives, et cetera, we are making sure we're understanding them very clearly, and we are updating our practices to continue to be in full compliance with the applicable laws and rules. So it's pretty much as simple as that as we carry out our work, okay? And then the last one, which is last on the sheet, but maybe first in our hearts, is creating and maintaining a work environment that maximizes the health, happiness, and productivity of an excellent staff. Our team is amazing. They work really hard. They're super talented, and we want them to be both happy and productive. And so we strive for that all the time in the work that we do. Okay, that's the goals, and I'm happy me or any of our team are happy to answer any questions and take feedback from you if you have any.
Okay, any feedback from anyone?
Amy,
Yeah.
Andrew, I like the distinction of not getting into the micro part of the how with the goals. I think the principles set forth and the values are, that will drive the outcomes are the most important, especially when we're living in, regardless of what's happening in the federal government right now, and it affects everything, but the financial standing of tax spaces and what that may look like in the coming quarters, I think is very important. So thank you.
That's a great point. And Marion will get in a little bit more to revenue as we go forward here, but thank you. So just as a process reminder, Madam Chair, I should have said this up front. The Budget Committee reviews all of these materials, and the notion is that you would make a motion to, pending any changes that you might want to make, you would make a motion to recommend these to the full council. And then on the 20, whatever the date is, next Thursday. Say again?
27.
Thank you. On the 27th for the council meeting, we would do this again in an abbreviated fashion, consider them with the council, and then the council takes the action to release them for public review and comment. And also we send them to the COGS. And then we come back in May and do final action. That's the flow here. And the Budget Committee has the responsibility of the more detailed review.
Great. Thanks for that clarification. I wasn't sure if we were releasing it today for public comment or if we were sending it to the full committee for recommendation. So appreciate the clarification.
And then,
Go ahead. No, please.
I think we're about to say the same thing, which is rather than doing an individual action on this, we do goals and budget and work program and then do one action combined.
Yes, that's what I was planning for. So that will be great.
We're on the same page. Okay.
Perfect. All right. So do we want to talk about budget?
Yes, please.
Let's do it.
So this, as Andrew noted, this is our usual flow through the year. So right now in March, I bring to you our proposed budget, which is our initial budget that anticipates new revenues for next year. So as you know, lots of our projects are multi-year. And so in October, what we do is after closing the books on the prior fiscal year, we bring any expenses and revenues that we have for multi-year projects into an amended budget. But this initial proposed budget is pretty much the same as last year, and that's typical of this organization. We see, as you can see, a 3% increase. So we're relatively flat from the same time last year. So that's column F here, the initial budget of May, which was adopted in May of 24, to the proposed budget of right now, March. And so I've made those slightly gray, but I'm not sure if that's coming through. It comes through in the packets. And then there's a comparison here on column N that is also connected to footnotes that we've provided. So just as a really high level overview, I'll go over some expenses and then also the correlating revenues. So we, as Andrew mentioned, our priority really is our staff, is our amazing staff. And we prioritize investment in our staff really above anything else. So you'll see there's a 6% increase in that budget line, but that, as usual, is just a cap. It's meant to be a placeholder so that we can see any specific COLA and merit increases that we haven't actually decided on yet. We look at our partners and our area and the trends, and we make sure that our increases are in line with all of those, and those decisions will be made in May. And then also health increases, health benefits, that kind of thing. We just make sure there's some room in that line. And so that line does not change when we go to the amended budget. You can see that happened. So last March, when we adopted the budget for the salaries and the compensation, that did not change when we went to May, and that's typically what we do. And then the other place where we typically see a lot of change is in the contractual line. And this year we didn't see much because we finished a couple of big projects we plan to finish, couple of big projects this year. One, the Power District Transportation Study. The other is a mixed-use visuals project that actually has been a really exciting new project we've done with support from the Department of Commerce and the Land Use Training Fund, which will provide really wonderful visual resources for communities to use in planning. But that is anticipated to be finished this spring. And then, we
Can I
did.
I can't resist just quickly jumping in on that one. For example, Draper, there was a lot of consternation. I think it's fair to say that as they were considering how to do their station area plans. And one of the things that everybody realized was missing was the ability to have visuals that could help people understand what would different development scenarios look and feel like. And so we put some of those together, and it helped them, the council members and also stakeholders, have a better sense of when we talk about X type of development or scenario, what might it look like? And we want to make those types of resources available to more of you. And I know many of you have dealt with this, and having good renderings is really important. Thanks, Mary.
And it's entirely funded by this grant that one of our staff members, Tim Watkins, received from the Office of Land Use Training. So that's really been a great project. And then we've also done a significant amount of work on our station area planning. So there's there's a timeline on that planning work. And so a lot of that we are hoping to be finished with a lot of that in this year. And then we'll also have some budgeted for next year. But the difference in that contractual line represents the completion of some of that work. And then the addition, as Andrew mentioned, of our activity-based model development project, which will be a 3-year project in coordination with UDOT and MAG and UTA. What we typically do, as you know, in our budget is actually put all of the expense into that first year. And then it will be one of our many projects that then continues on year to year. So right now we have $500,000 to $600,000 of WFRC funds, and those are our federal funds allocated for this contractual expense. And so then you'll see that line in October, that line will grow quite a bit. But right now that 4.9 million represents new funding and the projects that we're anticipating right now to see in that line for next year. The
on
rest
that, by the way, on the activity-based model, this is what I mentioned before. Our analytics team at WFRC has the lead responsibility for developing, maintaining, and utilizing the travel demand and real estate market models that are the underpinning of so much of the work that we do. So we do that essentially for MAG, Mountain Land Association of Governments. They are, of course, involved, but we do this modeling for the entire region. And then we also provide a real supporting role for statewide transportation modeling. And it's just, we house truly the best team, the core transportation modeling team in the state, and it supports not just our area, and that's partially why UDOT, UTA, and MAG all contribute to us to support that work.
Right. And then the budget, as I present it, has these line items, the expenditure line items, and you can see the rest of them. We don't see a significant change. There is another $100,000 here in supplies because we're purchasing a data set to support the activity-based model. There's a specific line there that's in the footnotes, but that's why that line goes up quite a bit. But otherwise, those are holding steady and are sort of usual expenses over the years. The next section of the budget is an expenditure by program.
Mary, will you just pause go back up to that? Let's just do one momentary pause and see if anybody has any questions about anything that's here.
Any questions on the expenses?
Okay. I should note the materials that we sent out. Marion does a very detailed job of explaining all this. You see the footnotes down the right side. So again, we want to make sure that you all and anybody that ever wants to see any information about our budget has all the explanations. So the budget materials we put out are very detailed.
Very detailed, okay. Yes. And on that note, Andrew, the expenditures that we present are actually presented in two different ways. So this is the by what I call by object or expense line that says how much are we going to spend on salaries and on all the different expense lines. And then the second part shows by each program. And so these are all of the programs that we are operating, some of which have annual amounts. For instance, the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, is always $50,000. So many of those hold steady year to year. Work that we do outside of our MPO responsibilities, Tooele Valley RPO, Morgan County RPO, Davis County Local Option Assistance. Some of those more directed programs are all laid out all the way down to our Community Impact Board for $2,000. We carefully look at that. So these programs, some of them do not fluctuate very much. And then as we get down, you can see, for instance, the Power District Transportation Study, which was only for this current fiscal year. We got $500,000 to do some specific work the Utah legislature asked us to do, and we will be completing that by June 30th. So that is all, from this year and does not come into the next year. And here's our activity-based model. The total cost is 1.1, but we will have revenues from our partners to cover a significant portion of that. So it really makes it a cost-effective way to do this work that's so important to what we do, but also really helps our entire region. And our analytics team, as Andrew said, is taking the lead on that. The next section, are there any questions on these programs?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Marion, so what is the impact going to be on the local administrative advisor program as administered by WFRC? And how much do you think that that cut will affect what you're able to do?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. The local administrative advisor program, of course, shows up here as a program, and that leads us right into a look at our revenues. And so as I hit send on these materials to you late last week, we did get the news of the cut to that, which is this line right here. And I talked with Andrew and I said, let's talk to the budget committee about this and talk about how to mitigate the effects of this. In the short term, Mayor
Marion,
Silvestrini,
let me just interrupt you for 1 sec, just to provide a little bit of context here.
Oh, sure.
The local administrative advisor is a relatively new program. It's statewide, where the state is providing funding to the League of Cities and Towns and to each of the state's associations of government. So WFRC is one of those, to hire, and we hired a single person to function as the local administrative advisor to help the smallest communities, the small and rural communities, with their basic functions of government if they do not have dedicated, like city manager or dedicated staff. And the program has been, I will say, incredibly successful, and people that work in those smaller communities have been very, very supportive of it. It's in our area, it's principally small communities in Tooele County. Also some communities in Weber County, and principally those areas. And so we have gotten $150,000 per year to support our hiring a staff person to do that work. And then, as Mayor Silvestrini is noting, at the very end of session, and I think I won't get into all the play-by-play on this, but at the very end of session, the state cut the funding for that program that comes through GOPB in half. And I would just say that the indications that we have is that that was not done because of a lack of support for the program, but rather was tied into other issues. So now we, WFRC and all the other AOGs, the League of Cities and Towns, GOPB, are all assessing now what do we do, because this program has been very successful and very supported. How do we carry that program forward? And that's the dialogue that we're having right now. Mayor Silvestrini, is that getting at what you're?
It's getting at what I'm at. I mean, I recognize the value of this program, and it's particularly important to help smaller communities that don't necessarily have resources like some of our larger ones to implement changes to state law that come down, as well as just, do the day-to-day things that smaller communities need to do. I'm just wondering if there's a way. I mean, I know that you're going to have discussions about this, but whether there's a way to find revenue from some other source. I would hate to see this program cut back, and I would hate to see the folks that we have, I know that all the MPOs and the league have hired people to do this work, and I hate to see us have to do a reduction in force because of a significant budget cut. So are you talking about those things, Andrew? And do you think there'd be, is there any other funding source that we might be able to apply to this? Do you think that would be politic? I mean that in a literal sense, given that I assume that there was a reason that this, and I think this came out of the Senate, but there's a reason that they cut this program, and I don't want to run afoul of that necessarily, but I really think it's unfortunate to see this program cut, because it just hurts small cities. It really hurts them in a bad way. So.
Well, Mayor Silvestrini, I'll comment, and Marion, you can comment about how, as of this moment, we're thinking about it within our budget.
Mhm.
We tend to agree that this program provides a lot of value. Madison Aviles is our LAA. She's fantastic, working with all the smaller communities. And so the dialogue is happening now among the AOGs and, as I said, the league and GOPB about, so now what do we do? Are there other funding sources that can support this that would be politic, to use your term? But we're looking at those options, and then also evaluating what within our own budget could we potentially do to make sure that we keep this going. Marion, do you want to comment on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Two things. The program was started in FY24. And we did not actually hire Madison until January. So just on a plain dollars, you can see that we brought some carry forward into this year that we will also continue into next year. So as I look into FY26, this next fiscal year, we have just about enough actual dollars from the program itself to be able to keep Madison on board. And our intention is to keep her working at WFRC. And so given the fact that we have a nice mix of funding sources at WFRC and are able to carry those funds forward into next year, right now I think we're in a good place to start having those conversations and to look at other sources of revenue, talking with the league. So the league, it's coming through GOPB, but the League of Cities and Towns, of course, is our partner in that. That's where the cohort of local administrative advisors is sort of housed administratively. They're housed actually in our various AOGs and at the league. And so I think going forward in the very immediate term, we are okay financially, but we're very interested in continuing those conversations because it's important to have everyone on the same page in terms of where we're finding those funding sources.
And Marion, to your point, our budget is a mix of federal funds, state funds, and local funds that come from the counties. And so, Mayor Silvestrini, to your point, we have a degree of flexibility in where we apply those funds. And so we're looking at that within the budget. Maybe, Marion, it makes sense. We're talking a little bit about state. We've referenced local. Maybe why don't you state and local? And
exactly.
I
was going to say
federal. Okay.
I was going to say the same thing. So we'll go back up to the federal side, but we have a section here that represents our state sources, some of which are very specific. When we had a partnership with UDOT supported our Safe Streets for All, that was its own line. So we also have a lot of joint projects that we do with UDOT support. They're using state funds for that support of projects that we do together. Station area planning, we had a $5 million budget that we shared with Mountain Land Association of Governments to make sure we were doing the station area planning for the entire region. MAG has basically finished their work on that. And so the remaining funds are budgeted in the WFRC budget for that work. And so you'll see, we had 2.8, I'm planning to spend 1.8, so the leftover is $1 million. The math sort of flows through there. And then any amount that we haven't used by the end of this current fiscal year, this number will go up a little bit, likely, for our amended budget. So these are our state sources, largely the GOPB and the also the UDOT, and of course GOEO here on stationary planning, and the Department of Commerce was our state source of the funds for this, for our mixed use visuals. That's that.
So
that
Marion, it's worth
there.
noting that as of right now, we're still showing the local administrative advisor as 150,000.
That will change.
Know that the cut has been made to the budget, the state budget, but given that we're in dialogue at this moment with the partners, including GOPB, about how to approach this, we feel that it's perhaps premature in this initial budget to modify that. As noted, this is just the first cut at the budget. We don't actually take action until May. So our suggestion at this point is to leave the numbers as is as this dialogue happens, recognizing that we're likely to have to make a modification to that in terms of the sources of funding for that program before we adopt the final budget.
Yeah, and I think we do make a note of this in our footnotes. So I'll make sure that I'll confirm that so that we have some transparency about where we're getting that number and what we hope to do with that, to keep an eye on that. The local sources, the dedicated project funds are local funds that are our matching funds for a lot of our projects. And support, for instance, from Salt Lake County for our Transportation Land Use Connection Program, and then partnership with MAG and UTA, and then the local contributions from you, our member counties, are actually, this is the most detailed part of our budget because we want to be really transparent about the way that we have support from our local counties that helps us with federal matching funds for several of our federal grants, for the work that we do outside of our MPO responsibilities, and basically all of those, the work that we do, sort of more generally speaking, is supported by these local funds. And so there's the breakdown there. It's at the bottom of the budget. Any questions on the
And
local?
those, just as a reminder, those are projected to go up by, can you explain the 5% increase?
The 5% is an average over the past 3 years of CPI. So we take we in 2018, I believe the council voted that this is how we would calculate those every year. So last year was particularly high. And as things have evened out, this year is a little lower than last year in terms of the increase. And I think it should, just because it rolls over those 3-year averages, it certainly won't be higher than this next year. So it would likely be lower, much lower.
Okay, all we have left is federal. So,
Yes, so back up to, can I say one thing quickly about
course.
federal? The big jump here in the STP funds is just to kind of get this part out of the way, is our activity-based model funds that we're planning to use federal funds to support that work. And so that's the big increase here, because otherwise, usually these numbers don't have such a big increase, but that takes care of part of that picture. Andrew, do you want me to pull this down or keep this up while we
yeah,
chat
I'll just leave it there for 1 sec. So I'll just note to you from our federal funding sources, the federal funds make up the majority, a significant majority of the WFRC of our budget. And our main sources come from the so-called PL, or planning, metropolitan planning funding. These are federal formula transportation dollars. They go through USDOT, and under federal law, a certain percentage of the federal funds are set aside for planning. And so those come to us. That's the PL, metropolitan planning. There's also the STP, or surface transportation program, which is principally used for transportation projects in the region and is also utilized for our cost of administering the programs. And then we use some of that STP funding to do the work on our Transportation Land Use Connection, our TLC program, et cetera. So those are our two largest single sources of funding. And we also have planning funding that comes through the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, which is a corollary to the Federal Highway Administration planning funding. So the good news about these funds is that they are stable formula dollars. And if you would, then Marion, you can drop that down and just here's a little commentary. So let's talk about what's going on in Washington right now. Our federal funds to run WFRC, as you just looked at, are federal formula dollars that are based on a multi-year transportation authorization legislation. We mentioned that already. The current authorization expires in 2026. And so the funds flow to us by formula. So there's a lot of stability there. So that is a good thing. We are at a moment right now in the federal budget and in Washington where there is significant uncertainty with regard to the budget, particularly with regard to discretionary grants, not as much with regard to core formula programs. Our space, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that's the multi-year bill. Last time around, when it was adopted in 2021, it funded the core programs that we're talking about. That's what UDOT uses to maintain the interstates, et cetera, and we use for our planning work. And then it also added on top of it lots of discretionary grant programs. And, you know, we in Utah, we've all been competing for those discretionary grant programs, but they don't represent the core of the work that we do. I would say most of those discretionary grant programs are in question right now. They're under review to whether they will continue because they're expensive add-ons. In fact, the administration has in many ways paused many of those programs, sort of stopped awarding new grants as they are reviewing the nature of those grant programs. And in fact, they are also pausing on and doing a review of even existing grants that have been awarded where all the funds haven't been obligated. As far as our budget is concerned, as noted, our funds come out of those stable formula funds. We don't rely on discretionary grants to fund our ongoing operations. That would not be a prudent thing to do. I will note to you that we have one grant that we were awarded, but is on hold. It's the phase 2 of our Safe Streets for All planning work. We got one federal grant a while ago. We administered it. We developed a comprehensive safety action plan. Wayne and his team. We were awarded another grant to actually do corridor-based safety plans for up to close to 10 corridors in the region. That grant has been put on hold. We hope that moves forward. It's important work, but that remains to be seen. And so we will see what happens with these discretionary grant programs. I will tell you this also, there's been some questioning of, well, what is the federal process of doing routine approvals for the TIP and for the RTP and other things like that. And there was for a period of a week-ish, a directive that said Federal Highway Administration is essentially stopping all approvals unless they go up to USDOT headquarters for review by the Office of General Counsel, which is a very small group of people. And across the country, people got concerned about that because there's so many routine approvals that are just constantly going through the process that a lot of people expressed concern that this was going to grind to a halt the infrastructure investment project development that is ongoing all the time. And that concern was expressed, and the administration essentially said, that's a good point. Never mind, we're going to let those routine approvals go through the regular processes. So that was, candidly a relief, even as the discretionary grant programs are being reviewed. Okay. As we look ahead on this issue, I already mentioned reauthorization. That is where the real dialogue will happen about what is the real federal purpose of the transportation investment in infrastructure. And the dialogue that we've had with our national partners and with our congressional delegation, I would say, generally speaking, there's an understanding that not every program can or even should continue, given the significant federal deficit and debt that that our country is facing, and that we need to be focused on what are the core purposes of the federal transportation program and the federal, state, regional, local partnership in transportation. And so we have been emphasizing, along with all of the other Utah transportation stakeholders, the focus is on those core programs that we have already talked about with you here and shown in our budget, less reliance and less focus on the additional discretionary grant programs. So for our budget, this stuff is not notably impactful because we don't rely on those additional programs for our core budget. But it will be a subject of really intensive discussion over the course of the next, 3 to 6 months, a year. And in fact, I anticipate, having more dialogue about this, including at the next council meeting, about where we stand and what our principles are for reauthorization. Maybe I'll stop there on the federal budget, and Marion or Madam Chair, if there's anybody who wants to talk about this, of course, we're happy to.
So Andrew, one of the things that we tried to do in our council and at the National League of Cities caucus, and also with our delegation, is get more clarity, not just transportation, but across the board. I mean, a lot of us on this call represent local governments, and pretty much what we got the answer. I mean, it probably depends on whether anything has DEI in it or something like that. But if funds have been committed and if you have a contract signed, you're probably okay. That's what we were being told. So, otherwise everything else is subject to being looked at again. So.
Yes, Andrew, let me just ask just a practical question here. Certainly the federal government is pretty much unstable in terms of how they're trying to find ways by which they're going to save money. We've certainly seen that in federal employment. Hillfield's obviously, there's 1,000 employees up there today that's wondering whether they're going to have a job. We've certainly seen a lot of activity in the IRS. These are Weber County, Davis County issues that we're working, but seriously, the impact of any type of change like that could have some regional impacts in terms of what we do in this area. My first impression is going to be is that in light of the fact is we don't have any firm commitment the federal funds are going to be there. Now, I'm telling you, they're going after the big ones right now, but I don't think it's suggesting that even some of the smaller ones that we may be dealing with aren't subject to some type of a review and very possibly cut. I think that's going to come out as they move through the budget and look at all of the funding that's taking place. What can we do within the Wasatch Regional Council today that can give us good security, so in case there is in fact going to be cuts that may become, that we won't find ourselves where you're in a risk situation where you have to reduce people in large part because the funding just dried up. And I share that comment with you only from the standpoint that suggests is that you said in your budget that people, the employees, is one of your biggest expenses. What can WRC do today to help prepare just in case we find ourselves in a situation where funding is cut short?
Mayor, thanks for asking that question. Marion, I'll let you comment on this as well. I'll just say that we pay really close attention to this issue that you're raising. And we have a lot of confidence in our budget stability going forward for a variety of reasons. One of them, as I mentioned already, our funding comes principally from a multi-year authorization, and it is formula funding as directed by Congress. And we have heard no indication that those funds are in jeopardy. And so we're confident about that. I would also note the strong support that bipartisan support for the work that we do in those core federal programs. We also are really careful in the way that we do our budgeting, and that essentially we establish a reserve, if you will. It's kind of a time lag on the utilization of funds. So we're not spending today a dollar that we got in today. We set up a process by which we have a lag. Therefore, if there is a temporary cessation or reduction in funding, we have the ability to maintain our operations as we assess the impacts of that adjustment. And Marion, you can comment. I saw Commissioner Stevenson also, it looked like he might want to comment on this point. Marion?
Yeah, just briefly, I absolutely agree with Andrew on that approach. And if you want to see the numbers, those are on our balance sheet. Just to sort of bring that finance support to the approach that we have, the process that we have at WFRC. So Andrew and I had several conversations over the last couple of months to look at basically our fund balance and the way, what our time lag is and how long we can operate. And we're feeling confident that our operations can continue as all of this is being worked out.
Having said that, we are continuing to look for ways to ensure that we have stability, and we'll keep thinking about that. And if any of you, at any point have thoughts and want to talk in more detail about that when we have more time, we would welcome that.
Absolutely.
Well, the reason for my comment would be is the federal system up here have gone in and done a complete hiring freeze. And so what you're seeing right now, where there was actually a lot of fluid taking place, bringing in new people, Federal Service, Hill Air Force Base, IRS are shutting down any future hiring in that. So my comment to you would be, is WFRC considering maybe also doing a hiring freeze and basically at least prevent it as best you can, just in case there will be some type of interruption to the funding source?
Well, as of now, I'll just say that we don't have any plans to expand our workforce at this moment. And we're being really careful and sort of reading the literal and the figurative tea leaves ahead as to where the budget is. And so we're being really careful about that and don't have any plans as of right now to add FTEs. Commissioner Stevenson?
Yeah, I was just going to want to follow up a little bit. Is I do think that we're into a new world as far as what's taking place with budgetary type things. And I think this is going to affect, from the very top all the way down to, the municipalities as far as it goes. And I think that we're all going to have to realize that, the ultimate dollar that we've all had for a lot of years is probably going to start running shorter and shorter and shorter. And that I think what you're doing, you and Marion are doing here, is very smart, because we are being conservative with what we're doing. And I think all of us in our local governments have got to become very conservative. And, I think that's just going to be the way it is. So.
Yeah.
Okay,
Madam Chair.
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks for all these comments. This is obviously a big issue that we'll need to watch closely, and we appreciate our good staff and the ways that you guys are taking care of our finances. So I know we are at time for our meeting today, and it looks like we've got some who are going to need to start jumping. So do you want to go through the Unified Planning Work Program quickly, or do you want us?
I can do that incredibly quickly, which is simply to say that the Unified Planning Work Program is extensive detail about work we're going to do on the budget. So we were actually not planning and going over that. We sent it to you, happy to answer any questions, but we don't feel it needs any discussion right now. Although I want to give compliments to Wayne for all the work that he and his team do in assembling those details. And so, Madam Chair, that brings us to the end of our discussion about the draft goals, budget, and Unified Planning Work Program. And then if any of you are willing to, again, that we would love to have you all take action to recommend that the council release those materials for public review and comment.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion to that effect.
I'm happy to make that motion. And my camera's off because the sound was a little quiet and I can hear you better with my camera off. So anyway, yes, I'm happy to make that motion that we release these materials for public comment.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, council member. We will take a vote on this. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you. Our other item we have for action is the updates to the administrative and accounting policy and the personnel policy. So who would like to take that?
Marion's going to take those, and these are modest items that I think we can do quickly also.
I'm going to give a very brief overview and then open that up. The materials I sent out that are dropped also in the chat went through this in more detail. There was an update to what we call the uniform guidance, which governs federal grants. It was made last year. And so I reviewed our policies to make sure that we are in compliance with those that new guidance. One was an increase in the capitalization threshold, which we honestly don't really use, but I like to have the numbers be in line with the federal guidance on that, from $5,000 to $10,000 for depreciating equipment. And then the other was to make sure that we had in writing, and that was the critical piece, a whistleblower policy. So we've always had a fraud hotline at WFRC, but we have Kevin found a template for a whistleblower policy. We looked it over. We've got it proposed to you. It's boilerplate language. And again, it just really boosts what we already had and clarifies that in writing for our employees. And then the other two, as I was reviewing the policies, I have two other relatively minor adjustments. We have a new bank account, which has a great internal control for mobile deposits. And I wanted to make sure that that was there so the person can make a mobile deposit and has no other access to the account, which is really great because that deposit is made and then it's reconciled by another member of staff. So that's an internal control made clear in that policy. And the second is to increase our educational assistance for our staff. That number of $1,500 had not been updated for a long time. And the IRS does have a $5,250 limit. And so in line with our partners and our other AOGs, we propose to increase our educational assistant reimbursement amount to that. And again, this is not regular professional development. This is it's kind of rare because most of our staff already has advanced degrees, but this will cover if somebody does want to pursue another degree, actual educational assistance. So those very quickly are
that's related to and advances their work at WFRC.
Exactly. And the assumption is also that they will stay at WFRC. There's some language around that as well.
Okay.
Internally.
That's great. I think these look really good. I like the whistleblower policy. I think that's really important to have. So great work on that. Does anyone have any questions or comments, or if you have a motion to recommend these, that would be helpful as well.
I make a motion we accept the amended policies and procedures.
I'll second it.
All right. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the next item is just the executive director report. Andrew, do you have anything more?
I don't. Thank you all for sticking with us for a detailed discussion about something that's really important. And again, at the council meeting on the 27th, we will, with your recommendation to the council, describe these to some extent, and then make the recommendation that they release them as we discussed. Marion, Wayne, Andrea, is there anything else that we did not cover that we need to say?
No, thank you so much. And I invite any questions. If you think of a question later, please get in touch with me.
Thank you. Thanks, Wayne and Marion. And we appreciate all that your team does, and you guys do good work. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn. A reminder, our next meeting is Thursday, May 8th. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.